Hey Jazz Tech, it's Michelle Medler here. Today we're going to listen to a little bit of Quincy Jones Big Band. Let's see, you got Phil Woods playing alto sax, Zoot Sims on tenor, Clark Terry playing trumpet, Lee Morgan playing trumpet. This big band is filled with all-star combo players. It's a very amazing big band to listen to. There are some charts available if you get into those very top-level high school band programs and colleges and such. Anyway, the topic of today is to get into the differences between teaching combo and jazz band and big band, excuse me. What are the pros and cons for having one versus the other in your program? Maybe you should be having both. In any case, I think you'll probably in your careers run across the need for both. So let's just start off by talking about there's a topic that's been going around in recent years about, a lot of the music educators, especially at the collegiate level, have been arguing about whether big band is relevant. Why should we teach big band in our program? They talk about it being a dead art form, has little to do with modern music. The current jazz that is happening is very combo based, small group based, I mean. And, so there's definitely an argument going on there. You can be maybe a lot more creative and individualistic and get more potentially out of your musical experience if you're playing in a combo situation. In a big band, you might be playing parts that, that's fine and everything, but you might not get to solo very much or have those opportunities that you would within the combo. So this argument comes out. And personally, I grew up and came into the scene in the late 90s, and at that point in the Portland, Oregon area and the Seattle, Washington area, I was kind of split between both at that time. You could go out pretty much 7 nights a week and play in a big band as a horn player. People would say, hey, I need a saxophone player tonight, can you come down? And yeah, sure. These gigs didn't necessarily pay very much. If anything, a lot of them were rehearsal bands that maybe rehearsed once a week, and they might have a couple gigs a year, but these people were dedicated. They would get together and just go read music. It's it comes from the tradition of territory bands. So World War II era, you got the 1940s, the big bands are roaring. This is the popular dance music. The veterans, they could be veterans at that point, but the soldiers had dances, as relief. So while they're over fighting in Europe, they would have evenings where it would be they would bring the Glenn Miller Band in, who was the Army big band, and they would have a big dance, and there would be ladies that came in from the town and whatever else that they did to have their big hubbub and let the soldiers release some steam after their horrible fights. So imagine, my grandparents, they might go out big band dancing to this. Actually, they really didn't, but their era did, in any case. So that era, the World War II veterans, well, I watched as they started to get too old to come out to the clubs and, started dying off, and a lot of the band leaders got too old to do it anymore because they were the experts. So anyway, I brought up this thing about territory bands. There was a tradition of, here in Oregon, we might have several great big bands that are just really doing it. Like they're up there with the Count Basies and the Duke Ellingtons, but they're just not as famous. I'm going to space on the name. Well, I'll come back to it if I get it. This idea of territory bands was, I'm going to play and tour between Seattle and Portland and maybe San Francisco, and this band is coming into town and there's going to be a raging swing dance. So there was definitely a circuit, and the next band would come through, and these bands bought the charts from the famous bands. So if they wanted to play Duke Ellington music, they would buy Duke Ellington's charts from their places where they could get them. The sale of those charts kept the Duke Ellington band on the road and touring. Very, very interesting, and it's really expensive to get 16 to 20 musicians to tour on the road. It wasn't easy back then. It isn't easy now. Duke Ellington even ran into so many troubles being a black band that they wound up getting their own train car so that they could go down on the train to the south and pull into a train yard, and they had their own hotel and restaurant and place to eat. Not restaurant, but anyway, they could go to their train and they would all be safe, as opposed to they were coming into these towns and having trouble. They might get hotel rooms for a few of the band members, and then once they figured out that this was a black band coming into town, oh no, you can't stay here, and then they're scrambling for a room for the night. I mean, how awful. So this tradition of big bands touring, and it just, think of all the eras. It comes down to that big band did eventually start to die, but it was, still going in the late 1990s. By about the year 2000, I would say it was really on the decline. The gigs were getting fewer and farther between. A lot of the bands were fizzling out. Like I said, the band leaders were getting too old to do it. It's a hard job. So by about 2005, I would say pretty much most all of my big band gigs dried up. I haven't really played very many big band gigs since then. So they're right. It's kind of a dying art form. But the stuff that I personally got from playing in big band, especially being often a tenor player as I was growing up in high school, you get the inner harmonies. You're playing those really lush voicings. The compositional components, there's a lot of structure to the composition. I gained a tremendous amount as a musician from this. I have seen the results of musicians that come up and they've only played jazz combo. There's a lot of kids that are in specialized private schools, art schools, and they only get that experience. There's not enough music students to even have any kind of a concert program or an orchestra or band program. So they just put together a jazz combo thing, and they do it up really well. The downsides: the players don't get the idea of blending with each other and balancing. They're developing individualistic style and, coming out with their own voice. That is amazing. But then you go play with some of those musicians and maybe you have a quick arrangement in your combo. You can't blend with them. As a horn player with another, there is no way to blend tone because they never grew up and they didn't do that stuff. So there's a pretty huge disservice if players only grow up playing in jazz combos. There's ups and downs. It's not just a bad thing. But anyway, the pluses to combos: you get to be way more creative. You get to really work on soloing, taking multiple choruses. There's room for you as that soloist to just go and go and go and work on building. It gets pretty boring if the soloists aren't growing. So, you're relying on such few people. The drummer has to be really solid. The comping instrument, the piano or the guitar player, they need to really be solid with their chord changes. Your bass player has to be solid, tight with the drummer. The swing feel or groove feel, if you're playing that kind of a chart, all of those things need to be very individualized. And then even down to the horn players. If your horn player is playing the melody and just not getting the idea of the phrasing, you can't pull off a combo. Now that same horn player might be able to sit inside of a big band and play, second parts or third parts or something like that, and they're going to get through it. That's a good place for them to learn in that big band thing and learn how to get those articulations. But it's not always a place for everybody. Those more shy kids that just aren't going to ever come out, it might be a really difficult role for them to be in a combo. Not that it's not good for them, to experience. Something my high school band director did. We had just one jazz band. This was at Beaverton High School, which I graduated up in Seattle at Bothell High School. But at Beaverton, where I was most of my time, great director Tim Cease, worked with what he had. We didn't have the strongest brass for the job, We had a lot of sax players. 4 of us are out there playing professionally still, and it's pretty cool. We really fed off of each other's energy. It was a good program. One thing he did for us was he separated the band out for, I don't really remember how many weeks, but let's say it was a 6-week project where we were still working on our big band stuff, but we would go separate ways a couple times a week and work with combo groups. He assigned us a tune. I still remember being assigned Cherokee for this, and I was in, this group of certain students, and we were working on the chord changes to Cherokee and really trying to get better, and then performed it at some point. So I think he divided us up into 3 or 4 groups, and we didn't necessarily have the rhythm section. We explored the very, very early versions of Band in a Box for rehearsals. That was kind of ugly, but it's like the iReal Pro now, only the iReal Pro swings a whole lot better. Anyway, what that did for our whole band was it got us, the people that didn't play jazz, like they didn't understand a solo, they didn't understand the structure of a combo piece where there might be an intro, but you play the head, and then there's solos over the form, and then you come back and play the head, and you figure out how you're going to end it. This was new to a lot of the people in the jazz big band. And one of the secrets of jazz big band is that every player in every chair should be a jazz player. If they can all solo, even if it's just a little bit, then they understand more how to approach their parts, the swing feel, it's the whole thing of it. It's part of the language. So our band got a whole lot better, got a lot more competitive after that big project. So you may find that kind of a project really good. You might find that you have your top jazz big band, and that's great, but you have more kids that want to do jazz band. You could have enough kids that you can have another full second big band. That's awesome. And then maybe there's a few more stragglers. So you put together a combo. Combos are a great place to have odd instrumentation. It's a good use for a second or third jazz band. You can also turn that into the other direction and have, maybe you have a few really elite players at your school. They're really saying something. Put them in a combo together. Maybe they can still be in your top big band too, because they'll strengthen it. But maybe they're just in an elite group, and that they can compete on their own in the combo competitions. And it's a place where you're going to grow your soloists. They really get that experience. One thing that you do in combo is, especially at a younger age, is you work on transcriptions. Go learn 4 choruses of Miles Davis's solo on the song we're playing. Let's say we're playing So What. So go learn those 4 choruses of Miles, if he plays 4 choruses, and apply it. There's nothing wrong with a student musician performing somebody's transcription. There is something kind of wrong with that as a, professional jazz player. We kind of think of that as taboo. We quote, and we might go there for just a minute. It's not like a hard rule, but you don't go down to the jazz club and hear, the local saxophone player playing John Coltrane solos all night long. What's the fun of that? That's not the spirit of jazz and improvisation. That's very common. You might see them play like 8 bars of Coltrane solo, and then they take it someplace else. That's hip. You gotta learn the difference. But for students to get up and perform John Coltrane solo, that's just fine. You can evolve that, let them perform John Coltrane solo, and once they have it down, they can start to improvise. But combo can be an outlet for working on your soloists and an outlet for them to work on transcriptions. It's a great place for, let's see what I'm trying to say here. It's a place for you as a director to work on your arranging. It's not as difficult to voice out for combo. It doesn't take complicated voicings. It's sometimes more of a creative process of who's going to play the melody and when. Maybe somebody takes over. Maybe there's some counter lines that can go through. That type of a thing. Let's see, what am I supposed to say more about this? Checking my notes. I think I've covered combo pretty well here. So, going to the side of big band, I really do feel that this is not a lost art form. It might be passe, but so is the orchestra. You know, the Oregon Symphony right now has had, and symphonies all over the place have had a tremendous trouble trying to get audiences. You know, they're doing things like playing the film score live for Star Wars. They play the movie, and the orchestra gets to play along with it and play the film score. And that way people get to come and watch the movie. They're finding creative new ways to draw people in. Well, I mean, then the question becomes to those who are saying that we should get rid of jazz big band and do combo only. Well, I suppose in that sense we better get rid of orchestra and concert band because it's just not very popular. I completely disagree with that, obviously. It's these are training grounds. This is an art form. This is not an art that should become lost. You know, big band is to me just important as a wind ensemble is, or a symphony orchestra. You know, it gives you the chords to tune with each other. It gives you a sense of how to blend. It gives you a sense of varying articulations. It gives you a sense of following a lead player or being a lead player. You know, there is nothing like big band drums. Whoever thought you'd be the bus driver? You know, you are more important than the conductor in the wind ensemble, or the same, I guess. As a big band drummer, you are driving the bus that is a horn section. Horn players, they tend to slow down. So it's a fight, you know. Keep the tempo going. It's a big fight. Give them the right setup so that they really hit together. You know, there's a huge art form in becoming a big band drummer. And I know a lot of big band drummers that I've worked with who have become serious rock drummers. You know, and the chops and the sense of musicality and directions that goes through a piece, that follows through so greatly to becoming a great rock drummer. You know, any kind of drum set player. It may not have very much exactly to do with becoming an orchestral percussionist, but those are different studies, right? You know, it's still, one helps the other, though. It really does. So I do agree that big band has become a rare breed, but, you know, I still think so worth it. And there's the other side of running a school is the business side. You know, what is cost effective? You don't take a room full of fourth graders and put 4 or 5 of them together over here, and then 4 or 5 of them together over here, and separate them out with no teacher. You only have one teacher for all these little groups. You have to find ways to work with all 20, 25 of your kids at once, right? So that's what big band does. It's not cost effective to have, you know, one teacher per 4 or 5 kids. So to your program, that may not look very good. But then there are certain scenarios where you're going to need to split up into smaller groups. So one thing I want to say is Ashland, Oregon has the greatest band director right now. His name is Travis Modison, and he is doing some cool stuff. He's got, basically his jazz bands are combos, and he grows them. So his top band during this year, I saw them in fall of 2019 now, and I had worked with them in the spring or late winter of 2018. We drove down there, my quartet went down and worked with them. It was a really very cool experience, and it was kind of something that I hadn't seen before. He really had a strange instrumentation in his jazz band. This first group that we worked with was a vocalist who was kind of their lead a lot of the time. And she didn't just get up and sing a song like you'd expect. she would do like vocalises, I guess. Just she would sing scat types of things along with the horn players, be kind of part of the horn section, and it just became really great that way. Then there was a sax player who solos a little bit. You know, his sense of jazz soloing is developing, but he's not as far along as some high school students in that realm. There was a trombone player who was really getting her stuff together. She was just solid on the parts. I don't believe she soloed. There might have been something organized. She was featured, but it wasn't necessarily improv. Really, a lot of this group wasn't improv. And this director has some trouble because he competes against some of the great gurus of in our area, like Greg McKelvey, who is at Battleground High School, has been a guru since I was taught. I remember watching this really tall black guy conducting the most amazing bands. He was at Wilson High School when I was coming up, and those bands were killer. And he's just been a big hero to Ben and I. We worked for him over the years, learned a lot from him. He's one to watch if you get out there before he retires. Greg McKelvey this year had a combo that I had to judge against this Ashland combo. And oh my goodness, what a tough call. Greg's combo was executing things really, really well. And they were playing in a true jazz style, like the John Coltrane era kind of thing. Some just burning, killing solos, the tight jazz stuff, as opposed to this Ashland band who is more on the rock side of things, though Herbie Hancock, Chick Corea, a lot of people, they're in a very much a jazz realm. They're in a lane of jazz. It's just not so much the mainstream kind of jazz lane. The improv was less. And it kind of comes down to that with those judging those two groups. But truly, I think I got them about a point apart from each other. It was so difficult to say which way to go. And I know that Modison gets frustrated because, he comes in second to people like Greg a lot of the time. So there's still an aesthetic maybe for the adjudicators out there that is saying if you're in the straight ahead jazz lane, you might be a little more competitive. I don't know that that's really going to stay the mainstream. It really comes down to how well they played. But anyway, to go back to this Ashland band, I got through most of the instrumentation. There was a violinist. There were two keyboard players. One played guitar half the time and then switched to keyboard. And there was a bass and there was a drummer. And this group worked together from pretty much, I guess, the time they get to high school. I guess they're the same age. I don't know this exactly, but somehow he puts them together and then they stay together with each other as they go through. So I saw the same exact group of kids in 2018 that I saw in 2019, and it was remarkable to see how much they had grown and changed their set, and that they were more like a group, like that you would go see in Ashland in a club somewhere. They were just tight like that in a different way than any high school. So there's a guy in a small town that has odd numbers and odd instrumentation. The types of people or instruments. He's not getting 5 saxophone players, 4 trombone players, 4 trumpet players, and all on the same level enough to have a jazz big band. He does have a big band program. It's actually pretty decent size, but it is what it is. It's what he's dealing with down there. And you might wind up in a small school with strange instrumentation, or just varying levels. Maybe you have enough to make a big band, but you've got some really good students if you can make a combo out of that, So if you can get the big band together, I highly, highly recommend it because it exposes the musicians to the lush harmonies, like I said, those chord voicings, and there's really 80 years of varying styles of big band, going back to the Duke Ellington and early Count Basie kinds of stuff. just swinging and pretty bluesy, lots of style. And then you can get up into, what it was about a year ago, I saw Maria Schneider here in Portland, and she's still writing new music for her band. It's incredible. The rich harmonies. She's influenced by people like Copeland in her big band, and she's recently changed, in my mind, changed the instrumentation by adding accordion. Something I had never heard, and at first I thought was going to be really weird, but it was actually quite incredible. So she had a guitar, a piano, bass, and drums, but also an accordion. So this art form is still slowly alive and changing and being developed, Plus, there's a bunch of groove tunes that came out in the 60s and 70s and beyond, The Thad Jones Band does a lot of really great groove music. Buddy Rich did a lot of great groove music and that kind of stuff. And then there's Gordon Goodwin, who is like, kind of got his shtick going, like, he takes sing, 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 calls it sing, sang, sung, and it just kind of has wild new twists on the old classics. So that's what's kind of going on with that. Let's see. If you do have semi-odd instrumentation in your big band, you can, there are some convertible charts out there. So basically you have to, they all say they're different things, but it's like if you have one alto and a tenor or two and a trombone maybe, or a bari instead, and a couple trumpets or whatever, they make it work. And it's, maybe a part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4 that you could mix up between different instruments and stuff. You might find ways to arrange for yourself, if you have those strange needs. In a regular big band, we found that it's pretty nice to add flute and or clarinet. Clarinet players can play any of the trumpet parts and be just sort of a helpful aid, I guess. It's just, if you have a weak third trumpet player and you put a strong clarinet player in there, that can be a really nice move. It can also sound really good to put the clarinet doubling with the lead trumpet. In the case where I've had some times where I haven't had the high note trumpet players, and that lead clarinet being in there with the student that's learning the high notes is pretty good. So that works. You can also do the same thing with the flute, doubling the lead trumpet, or just sort of the melody lines. That can be a great way to do it. You can be creative with it, but it is totally okay to add these other instruments into your regular jazz big band. If you got the talent, find ways to use it. Okay, so I hope this has been interesting, good, compelling reasons for both big band and combo, and to let you know that you should know about both things. The more you teach combo, the more you're going to understand your rhythm section. You're kind of forced to. It's most of your band, As a sax player, that was a rough thing to start getting in. It was very intimidating to start teaching combos and figuring out what the heck to tell the drummers and the bass players. And you just, learn right along with them. Try to keep up. If you can stay a little bit ahead of them, learn the drums a little bit, learn a little bit about the bass or the piano voicings, it's just going to strengthen you as a teacher, and it'll help your big band teaching a lot too. So anyway, hope this has been helpful. Thanks so much, Jazz Tech. Take care.